Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 1 of Awaiting Orders. My name is Chandler. I'm here with Jaden. How you doing, Jaden?
Hello. I'm doing well. I'm
Excellent.
excited to be here.
Yeah, we're very excited to be here. I'm also here with Ben. How's Ben doing?
I'm great. Great to be here. Can't wait.
Yeah. So it's been a minute, Jaden.
It's been like 2.5 years, actually.
Yeah. What are we here to talk about? This is obviously episode 1 of a fun little project we're kind of kicking off here called Awaiting Orders, where we are here to talk about the brand new Starcraft The Miniatures game from Archon Studios. This has been something that we've been really, really excited about for quite some time, especially ever since the very first AMA they did. I was a little pensive when the initial, announcements happened, but they've really won me over in a really huge way. Got to do a long car ride with Ben, just being hyped about it.
That was a great time.
Yeah, it was glorious. So we kind of wound up the old content engine a little bit. We were really excited to actually get a chance to spend some time talking about the game and the things that we're really excited about. But for anybody who isn't aware kind of who we are, I want to talk about who we are for a moment. So as I said, my name's Chandler. Myself and Jaden have a reasonably long history doing podcasting for other miniatures games in the past. And it's something we, kind of fell off of for a while. Now that we've kind of got this new project we're really excited about, wanted to kind of get back in the saddle, as it were. So I wanted to kick things off a little bit by just talking a little bit about our history with this IP, which Jaden's going to have a lot to talk about. But I'll start with myself. I've been playing Starcraft since I was quite young. This has been a really, really core part of my life for a very, very long time. So the fact that there's something really exciting coming out that's Starcraft related, which has not happened in a very long time, is extremely exciting to me. But I was kind of worried coming into this game as it was being kind of shown off and released that this was just going to be like, I don't know, that I was going to get too caught up on nostalgia, basically, fall into that trap. But what I discovered is that what Archon Studios created is actually like a really interesting game with a lot of really interesting decision points, a lot of really cool stuff. The minis are awesome. And their attitude is just fantastic. So I'm super excited about it. It kind of brought up all this like old love for this IP that I haven't really been able to like express in a really long time. You know what I mean? I know, Ben, you've had a somewhat similar experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I played since the original start. Well, even before that, the Warcrafts, but it's just a foundational IP for my life. And I fell into a similar thing. I was worried that it would fall into an all too common IP cash grab, where it's like, we take this beloved thing and we ruin it, but make a little bit of money along the way. But I have been very pleasantly surprised. So
yeah, my impression was, even if they didn't ruin it, that it was at best going to be kind of like a Halo Flashpoint, where it's like fine. It's like a fine small little thing where they like release a handful of minis and it's cool, but you'll play it a couple times. We've got our odd man out, Jaden. Tell us a bit about your history with StarCraft.
You know that bit in like Harry Potter #2 where Harry goes like, I'll be sitting under the stairs, making no noise and pretending I don't exist. A little bit how I feel. I played a little StarCraft when I was like 22, and I didn't know anything about the IP. And then I'm actually the target audience that they want to grab, because I played the game once and went, okay, yes, I love this. I would like to play it a lot now. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
I am here for the rules.
For sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, no, and I think that's awesome. Plus, it gives us kind of access to that perspective, right? Which Ben and I just have absolutely no capacity to even relate to. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, what does this game actually truly look like if you're not invested in the IP at all? It's just like, I don't know. I don't know what that kind of looks like. Plus, I think it's kind of fun because it gives us the opportunity to like talk about it at you.
Yeah,
which you can attest. I love talking about things at you.
Accurate. I mean, this is how our first podcast episode together ever went. I was invited onto a podcast for another game that I was much worse at than you and the other co-hosts, and you talked at me for a while. That's just how it was.
Yeah, it works out great. So the next thing I kind of want to touch on is what's sort of our general vibe here. Like, what is it that we're kind of after for people who aren't used to sort of our way of doing things, the way line of sight sort of stuff. So our kind of approach to games is we really like getting very much into the weeds of like all the little mechanical details of games. There's a few different kind of aspects that we look at it from. On one level, I think all three of us definitely have a degree of competitiveness to varying degrees. We've spent a lot of time at events, a lot of time at tournaments for various games, going all the way from being, taking it immensely seriously all the way to showing up for fun, but wanting to make sure we kind of know, not to say that it's not always fun. But the other thing is we have a lot of interest in game design as a whole. Between the three of us, we've played an enormous number of different miniatures games. I'm the sort of person who will try and enjoy, on some level, just about anything, to be honest, just because I find game mechanics really interesting.
We should have counted before we started this. How many have we played together?
Together,
oh man,
a handful, but like of all the things I've tried, I mean, I know that, obviously War Machine was kind of our OG back in the day. We've played, all three of us played quite a bit of Warhammer 40,000 together. I think a couple of us have some experience with Malifaux. We've got Conquest: Last Argument of Kings, which Ben is extremely experienced with, and I played a fair bit for a while. There's, I don't know, Infinity.
Infinity, yeah.
Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Shatterpoint.
Yeah.
X-Wing.
Yeah, it's X-Wing. Yeah,
X-Wing,
and Armada. I've never played Legion.
I have.
Yeah.
I was not a fan, but that's okay.
Fair enough. But yeah, so the thing you can kind of expect from us is that we really enjoy getting into all those little kind of nooks and crannies of like how a game system works. And on some level, that's from a competitive mindset of trying to kind of figure out like, hey, what things are actually good, what things seem to be strong, or what things seem to be bad. Where do kind of things fall, and how can you kind of put all of this into one cohesive, list or game plan or whatever. For me, a really huge part of that, and this is as somebody who has always kind of insisted on playing the weird stuff, it very much came from a sense of wanting to really inform my jank. Of having a really, really detailed understanding of what I was doing so that I could play with it a lot and kind of find interesting new things within those mechanics. The kind of emergent gameplay of miniature game mechanics is a huge part of what I really enjoy about them, the way that unique situations can come up. And so I always like playing weird stuff because I like those unique, weirder and weirder situations popping up over time, And so for me, getting super into all the little kind of details and stuff, part of it is that I do like to try to like play well. I enjoy the skill expression aspect of better at these games, but I also just really enjoy like the way that it lets me get into the weirdness, But yeah, that's a little of kind of where we're coming from. It's all kind of varying degrees of competitiveness versus, in my case, just genuinely pure Dark Horse nonsense. My calling card. Forever.
What this was nonsense.
Yeah, it truly never ends. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of room for playing weird off-meta stuff in Starcraft yet because there's like 4 units, but, we'll get there.
It'll come.
It will come over time. Yeah. What we wanted to do kind of to kick off this one and kind of have a chance to like let everybody see what we're about a little bit. We kind of each brought to the table some mechanic or aspect of the game we wanted to talk about a little. Something that we're really excited about this game and what it is that kind of helps us stand out. So we're going to start with Jaden. What have you got for us?
Okay, so I've done a fair amount of game design of my own at this point. We did Brawl Machine together back in the day. I was working on a project called Clash Machine towards the end of War Machine's Mark III edition. And I've also kind of made the bones for a couple of other games that have never seen the light of day. So the thing that fascinates me the most about StarCraft from a game design perspective, not a playing perspective. The thing that I love the most about them from a playing perspective is Protoss, but Chandler gets to talk about that. The thing I love the most from the game design perspective is how freaking brilliant the dual resource mechanic is for list building. And for those of you that maybe haven't looked at this too closely, there's 2 resources in the list building phase, and as I understand this, there's also these 2 resources in the computer game.
Yes.
So there's minerals,
Correct.
which is what you buy your troops with, and then there's Vespene, is that the right word? Vespene gas, which you build your buildings with, and the buildings are these cards that do something in the game. But in addition to that, they also unlock the sort of like force organization for your list at the same time, which I think is fascinating because it has this incredible duality of like optimization for specific things. Like, for example, in Protoss right now, the temptation is to play like 5 cards because they're all very expensive and do very, very cool things. But what that does then is it can potentially heavily restrict your list selection because you don't have slots for certain kinds of units. And it can also make it so that in the game, you don't have very many resources to play with because the cards also give you those resources. And just from a pure like innovation sector, like I've been joking to people as I've been introducing them to the concept of the game. I'm like, it's the Conquest deployment with Age of Sigmar fighting mechanics, with War Machine but better movement system, with tack this other thing on. But when it's to like the parts of the game that are genuinely unique, as things that I've never experienced before, this list building idea is so revolutionary that I suspect we're going to see a lot of copycat lists, like game design in this space in the next 5 to 10 years as people go, whoa, that is very different and that is very cool.
Yeah, I think it is. It's even kind of hard to describe because there's not really anything that it's quite like. A couple things I've kind of likened it to on some levels. It's a bit like building your own detachment in Warhammer to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But as far as what the cards actually give you, these are essentially, if you have played Warhammer, they're very similar to stratagems on a certain, but kind of with an extra twist on it. The fact that they also act as kind of their own resource that you can use for actual ability on your units and whatnot. But the other thing is, one of the issues that's plagued Warhammer for a pretty long time is basically to force org or not to force org, right? Where when Jaden and I initially started playing in 9th edition, they still had the force org stuff, right? And it was, you had to have this set number of like certain kinds of units, and then you would bring detachments that had a certain number of slots, and it was very restrictive, and it was their way of kind of, the way I've always put it is it was their way of forcing you to eat your vegetables.
Well, it wasn't even just restrictive, it was also like really confusing to try to get to.
It was immensely confusing. Yeah, the list building was really, really strange and just kind of esoteric. Where
I have a guilty confession. I played in 2 GTs before I built my first list as a Warhammer player.
Yeah.
So that's how
my method of learning how to build lists was I sat and built lists in something that would tell me if it was illegal until it said it wasn't illegal anymore. I just kind of poked at it constantly and was like, this? And it was really, really strange. And there's been versions of it in the past that were very gameable. But then they've swapped over now to a basically a complete non-force organization where you can just bring anything you want. And while there's a lot of benefits to that, it really demands that you're like not only balance, but your faction's internal balance needs to be really consistently, and it often isn't. So you end up in situations where you really just truly end up with factions are just going to take a handful of the best possible things, and that's it, right? There's no other choice consideration. Whereas if you come over to Starcraft in the way that they've done it, you go, okay, maybe this is not necessarily true, but maybe the best thing in Terran is Goliaths, right? Maybe that's just objectively the best possible unit. Well, they take 2 elite supply slots, right? So you have to spam the same card over and over again to keep taking more and more of these Goliaths, which you could do. It's absolutely legal to do. But you drastically reduce your options by doing that. You lose a ton of utility, right? I played a game with Ben the other day where I was abusing Path of Shadows on Stalkers to make myself very, very difficult to counterattack. If he had spammed a whole bunch of the same thing to run just one unit over and over again, he probably wouldn't have had Orbital Command. His only out for actually being able to shoot at my Stalkers, right? You lose a ton of utility in that respect. And in some cases, you just can't spam the same card. They've made a lot of cards unique. The only thing you could really bring like a whole ton of maybe is like core units. But
yeah, which is appropriate. It's kind of what you want, right?
But it's interesting because this is the other thing too, though, is so when you look back at kind of how people viewed the Force organization in Ninth Edition, it was looked at very negatively because it felt very restrictive, frankly, which kind of by definition a Force organization is supposed to be restrictive. Mm-hmm. Whereas in this case, you build your Force organization by making positive choices, right? You're like, I want this ability. I want to gain this thing. And by doing that, I get these slots, right? It's all kind of, you're sort of rewarded for those choices, and it might come up in a game. You're like, oh, I'm glad I picked that card. So it kind of like rewards you for leaning into a restrictive system, if that makes sense. Where you're like, you get to be a part of it.
And it's actually worth noting here that this is a game design principle that Chandler just mentioned, this idea of positive choices. When a system gives you a bad thing for doing an action, people tend to very much dislike that. But if the sort of bad thing is the default state of existence, and then you have a lot of options to change that into something that you like better, people tend to respond to that a lot better. And Starcraft does an amazing job of doing that in almost every single paradigm.
Yeah. I think it's very cool. What are you going to say,
One
Ben?
thing I noticed when building lists is I both found it working both ways. So I would take tactics cards to unlock units I wanted, but also change my units to get the tactics cards that I needed to answer certain scenarios that I would come up with in game. And that was very cool to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you go a little deeper into list building. I appreciate that. So I am some a little bit of information about me. I'll make Jaden laugh a little bit. So I love list building.
That is an understatement for anybody.
Yeah, I enjoy the process of sitting and like poking at lists for hours. Like just like, I have 5 points. I'll put this rocket launcher on this guy and take the machine gun off this guy. Like, I just love to do that all the time. And I will say that like the upgrade system for units in StarCraft, it's not like as extensive as I would like. I love that just crunchy Infinity style, like just sitting and nitpicking at it. And you don't so much have that, but you do get kind of what Ben was just describing, which is sort of this like interesting back and forth of kind of going back and forth between your units and your tactics cards, trying to like find where your happy medium is and kind of where your balance wants to be. And you're like, I have to make these decisions about, I'm going to sacrifice this ability maybe because maybe I like that ability, but I really wish if I, reduce it to a cheaper one, I could have 2 cards, and that's like an extra point for Adept Shade or whatever. Like because you're having to think about how it's going to apply to you in game too. It's not just list, but your list building, it's weird. Like your list building is almost a part of playing the game in that respect.
Yeah.
It's very involved in a way I really like.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've managed to make a deck builder into a minis game almost, which is bizarre and very cool.
It has a deck building vibe to it, right? I don't know if I would quite call it that fully, but it has that feeling to it for sure, where you're kind of building out those resources you're going to have access to. And even then, and like kind of mentioning just the upgrades on units, the upgrades on units are really interesting most of the time. You feel your units being more powerful when they're upgraded versus not a lot of the time.
100%.
Yeah, like the internal balance of that isn't perfect, but like, I mean, Ben, in some of our first couple of games, like we tried both unupgraded Marines and fully upgraded Marines, and like the difference is drastic in what they actually do to you.
Shields are good, turns out.
Shields are good. Slug throwers are the thing that gets me as playing a lot of Zerg. Slug throwers are just very, very good, right? And it's like without that resource, it becomes a lot tougher to kind of play that play style, right? But it also does add to the cost. It adds up. Another thing I've found really interesting is the way units are costed. I remember when the initial AMAs were happening, a lot of people were really confused about this, and I was really interested to see how it actually played out. But the fact that so going from 6 to 9 Marines is kind of costed the way it is versus just taking 2 units of Marines is kind of interesting. It's really not that expensive to max out units, but you kind of lose access to resources in other ways in that they're taking up supply slot. They're sometimes the point costs on upgrades are different. I think they've done a good job of kind of playing around with that. It makes it very interesting. To kind of decide, am I going to max? Something I think about playing Zerg is 12 or 18 Zerglings is actually an incredibly fascinating choice. Whether you're running 12 or 18 really drastically changes your intentions for what that unit's supposed to do. It's interesting. I found that to be a really fun process to kind of be involved with.
I guess to sum it up, like basically just StarCraft has a super unique way of building your list out, and it's one of the coolest things about the game, in my opinion. And even if you don't buy into the game, it's worth looking at it just to see like, wow, this is really neat.
Definitely. All right, Ben, what did you bring for us?
Oh, so much. I think I kind of float a middle ground between Jaden and Chandler. And so what I bring to the table is why I love actually playing the game.
Yeah.
Minis games can come with a lot of pain points. Oftentimes, like, an all melee army or an all ranged army in certain games can be pretty powerful, or like Haley 2, Tau gun lines, Custodies with all fight first. There's all these examples of like pain points. StarCraft has done this really interesting thing where they alternate every activation in every phase. And when you alternate your activations, the first one to pass, giving up the rest of their activations for the whole phase, gets to go first in the next phase. And the reason I love this is it really just like eliminates a lot of the pain points that come with styles of gaming, gun lines, teleportation, melee focus. Like they all have potential for pain points that are just eliminated because we're alternating activations. And so like, yeah, I might pass first and my Marine blob gets to shoot, a big unit of Zerglings. But then the other unit gets to charge and they get to charge something and they'll be much more difficult to kill now. I don't enjoy skirmish games a lot. I enjoy big mass battle games. And you just don't see a lot of alternating activations in those games. And so it's really refreshing to see that here.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things you said there that it's stuff I hadn't thought about for a couple of weeks, but I'm glad you brought it up because I wouldn't have thought to mention it. The alternating activations in mass battle is actually something I really haven't been interested in for basically ever. It's one of those things that comes up when people are talking about next edition of 40K, when people are talking about next edition of whatever. It comes up so often when they go, hey, what if they do alternating activations, right? And I think some games did it in interesting ways, like Conquest did some kind of cool stuff where you are, the card system in that game is really interesting to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't totally realize, and I think the missing link for me, the thing that hadn't clicked for me, is what makes this work is the way the phases are put together. You have your movement phase and it's alternating activation for that, but you're still using phases kind of similar to like Warhammer or something like that. It's just that it's done in this kind of alternating activations way, rather than being full on like I'm going to move, I'm going to shoot, I'm going to do all of my things, and then your unit gets. You get so much room to react to each step of what the opponent is doing. And what that means is some abilities that are normally really kind of neutered in a lot of games can be so powerful. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit in the stuff I want to talk about, but teleportation, right? Being able to just put a unit right in your opponent's face is like one of the nastiest things you can do in any miniatures game. In Warhammer, being able to drop in a unit outside 6 and still charge is like one of the most busted things you can do, right? It's truly insane. Whereas in this game, there's so many instances of being able to literally just put a unit right in somebody's face and just be like, I'm in charge range, but
or even in melee
in some cases, right? And it's just like, I am here to hit you, right? But the other person gets so many opportunities to respond to that situation before you get to do your next thing that it balances itself in a really cool way, in a way that I kind of didn't expect.
Yeah, and to go at this from the game design perspective again, which you're going to hear me say a lot because I spent a lot of time thinking about this. When I was designing the sort of like War Machine alternating activation skirmish game thing that we were working on for a while, this was one of the biggest problems with alternating activations, where everything goes and does all their stuff at once. It's not just that you have to like neuter so many abilities because placement and distances and positioning and such get so intensive, but phase locking it and then having this idea of passing first, go first, next phase completely obliterates the huge issue that the disparity between number of activations per side usually has. Normally, in an alternating activations game, there is an immense amount of power in just having a huge number of activations to bring to the table. This game, it's powerful, but it falls off really fast because the most important activations are usually like the first two. And then after that, it's like, yeah, it depends on the table state and whatnot. But for my experience, admittedly limited, there will be more opportunities here, of course. But it doesn't feel like having way more stuff is necessarily better in many situations, because your opponent with good positioning can set up their stuff in such a way that you could just get punished for having so many things on the table, which is fascinating.
It turns a lot of the like common tropes and issues in wargaming on its head, which is what I had alluded to. And like part of that is the phase system. When you first play StarCraft, you're going to be like, wow, the assault phase has a lot of stuff in it because it's like moving again, shooting, charging. But then you realize, oh, this is pretty key to making the game feel so good.
The assault phase is like the most powerful like game design aspect once you're at the table. But it's really well the choices of, and I have to imagine the process of coming up with all of that was fascinating, of deciding exactly what needs to go in each phase. And that assault phase is complex. There's a lot of stuff going on in that phase, but it comes together pretty well. Sometimes I still have little moments of trying to get my head around it where I'm like, okay, all right, you shot there. Okay, I'm going to melee combat over here. And it's like, that's a different phase. I'm like, oh, right. Right, my bad. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's really kind of, just taking the shooting phase and the charging phase and just like making them one thing is really interesting.
And charging feels like at least 40% of a melee unit's damage. Like it's not just a movement in this game.
Yeah, when we initially saw unit cards and I saw the devastating charge, like impact hits and stuff like that, I didn't realize how core to the game I think those impact hits are. They are kind of your melee unit's ability to interact and deal damage in that phase. They're kind of that unit's gun on a certain level. They're not usually immensely powerful, most impact hits, unless you're playing Zerg and you stack the crap out of them in some pretty crazy ways. Yeah. Once you're impacting on twos, they get a little spicy. It's that ability to shave a little bit of damage off. It's just an extra kind of tool in that arsenal. It's why my life for ire is on every Zealot unit I've ever played. Even though it's
so good.
It's only 3 more dice, right, at the end of the day, but it's just like, this is so important. The room to just do a little bit more damage is so important in these situations. Yeah, their balancing of ranged versus melee is really interesting, and they've taken something that's one of the, like I've always said, like pure gun lines are like the hardest thing in any miniature game. They struggle to be anything but useless or broken. It is a constant problem that gun lines have in miniatures games. And by making it so interwoven with the same process that melee is doing, I think they have a lot more room to balance it. And the other thing, and Jaden, you touched on this a little bit, talking about the number of units. I've actually been really amazed how much passing early for priority has happened. Here, the number of times I lost this game horribly, so maybe it was a bad decision, but when I played against Ben the other day, I had times where I was like, I'm going to not activate half my army. Like literally just like half my guys are just going to sit back there, because I'm like, I don't think what they have to do is relevant enough right now compared to what I get to do if I get to attack first. And that's actually come up like regularly in a way I didn't really expect it to. Because on paper, it looks very similar to how a lot of skirmish kind of sized games work. Yeah. But it ends up playing out it's actually something I'm thinking of. Every activation, I'm like, should I just pass? Every single activation. From like my first one, I'm like, what if I just passed right now? That's absolutely a thing on my mind.
Yeah. There's just so many great decision points baked into this activation system that cooked up, and it just makes it really engaging and really fun from start to finish, or from list building to finish, going back to Jaden's point.
Yeah. One of the points I do want to just like briefly touch on here also is that the other thing that this does, this like incentive to pass early almost, is that it really rewards player understanding of placement and timing in the earlier rounds and in the earlier phases. Because if you can afford to not do anything in the assault phase other than like one critical thing or two critical things, or maybe just not do anything in the movement phase aside from one or two critical things, because you've already positioned yourself really well the prior turn, that is an incredibly powerful thing that you can just rely on as a skill that can give you an advantage in matchups that maybe you're not supposed to be like favored in, or that you have problems potentially converting into wins, because you can just regularly say, okay, I get to do the important thing that I want to do every single turn and you don't, and that's enough to win.
Yeah, it's a very cool system. I think what's impressed me most about it, to be honest, is how much I've actually interacted with it. It's really just when they explain it, it feels like one of those things that you're like, it's mostly just going to be back and forth, though, just by nature of kind of how these games are. But it actually has been like a real choice every time, and I've found that to be
well. And it's funny because you also, like, to your point about every single activation, you're like, should I just pass? Every single time I pass priority back over, I'm like, please don't pass, please don't pass, please don't pass.
Yeah, no, genuinely, yeah. You're like, I really hope they don't pass, right? And you're like, there's so many times where it's like the other person's like, I'm going to activate this unit. And you're like, oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
You're almost excited when your opponent activates something because you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, you can squeak out one more thing before losing some really...
Yeah, well, and that came up in our game, Ben. There were so many times where I was just like, my position would be way better if I moved this adept unit. But if I do and he passes, I die. Like, there was a lot of times. And I died anyway. But, like, it just, yeah, it was such an interesting kind of set of choice. It's such a, like, it's a game of chicken. You're both kind of playing through the whole round. But anyway, all right, let's talk about my thing. So I'm going to preface this with a couple of a little story that's like barely a story, but whatever. So early on when I got into 40K, I got in with Thousand Suns, but another army that is actually, it's always been one of those armies that I've like almost fully bought into, but then just never really did, was Guard. I've always found Guard to be a really, really cool faction, really interesting. I do, as I get older, I do have a fascination with that, World War aesthetic. It just kind of gets to me. But I don't know, man, just like tanks and artillery, dude, they're exciting. And I actually remember like watching a game that made me not want Guard anymore. Because it was exactly the kind of list I wanted to play. That was like, look at all this sick artillery and like all these infantry units and all this cool stuff. And they proceeded to play out an entire game of 9th edition without moving like any models at all. Like literally just like, okay, my infantry models move about 5 inches forward. They never move again. And this is it. And they just never move anything. You just kind of sit there and roll dice back and forth. And it's this kind of realization that the most fun thing to me to kind of get to do in a war game is move my models around. And put them on the table. This game might be the most fun just getting to put models on the table and move them around I've like ever had. There are so many interesting choices you get to make with mobility. All the way from deployment and how you want to deploy, because you have so many ways to actually, like, I kind of laughed. I've played some games as Protoss where I'm like, yeah, my deployment edge is really just a suggestion. Yep. I truly don't have to interact with this at all. And the other factions can do it too, right? Protoss, I think, lean into it, but like other factions have access. You have stuff like the Omega Worm, you have stuff like proxy barracks. You have all these different tools where you can really deploy from a lot of really, really crazy angles, but also you have so much ability to move your stuff around inbuilt, especially in Protoss. This is definitely the most extreme there, where you have things like the Warp Prism, where you just have a place on a stick. You have things like leg enhancements on Zealots that are just they take them from being a relatively slow unit to just the most comically fast thing ever.
Well, and it's interesting because, like, yes, Protoss have the sort of like classic ones, but all of the factions do it in a very unique way. Like, Zerg just speeds things up so far that it's like, okay, I don't place very much, but I move like 9, so yeah.
Yeah.
And then Terran is like, what if we unactivate that thing that already moved? What if we teleport around with this once per game thing that can put us anywhere we like? What if we do this other thing? What if we like all of these cool things they can do?
Yeah, and you can decide how much of that you want to build in, right? Like, you really can kind of build out a list to be a pretty, like, I'm going to run at you from my table edge kind of an army. Or you can do all kinds of varying degrees of being able to be like, I'm going to show up everywhere on the table, just all over the place. And just gain like an enormous amount of kind of table control. There's so much mobility, and you get to decide how much of it you want, all the way from list building. Choices that I'm having to make with things like roaches of like, do I want burrow ambush, right? Which is an incredibly good ability, it turns out, that I need to use a lot more. Yeah, and everybody's kind of got their own unique ways. Like right now, one of the kind of fascinating things about Zerg is they have the only units in the game that ignore terrain for movement. That's a really powerful thing that is very unique to Zerg right now. And to be honest, I don't think a lot of other factions are going to get much stuff like that. It'll be the Reaper for Terran.
Yeah, I was going to say Reaper.
And like the Colossus, which is like kind of a hilarious one to have that, but that's the only other unit I can think of that does that. With their little spindly legs. And that's something that like Zerg will be able to really bring to the table as like a powerful thing that they kind of have access to, whereas Protoss are doing all these teleports. Terran, even just things like the fact that right now, basically all their core stuff has access to Stim Pack. Makes you very fast. Stim Pack and what is it? Go is the other one. Where you're really just zooming. Stuff moves at a very kind of reasonable, normal looking speed until you decide to put the resources into being mobile, and you can do it to almost anything if you want. And I just have found that to be a really fun process. I like the deployment process. I like that deployment process happens through pretty much the entire game a lot of the time. Some factions more than others. I've found Protoss really are deploying units until round 5, like somewhat often. Just the nature of Zealots being so high supply.
I was going to say, I don't know how much that's going to be true in like 6 months.
Yeah, we'll see.
Like,
and especially as people have leaned more and more into adepts and stuff. And I've had Zerg games where I just brought, tons of like 18 model Zergling units, and it's like, I'm still deploying like round 4, man. There's still more Zergling coming. It truly never will end. But just the amount of mobility, being able to reach down and physically like pick up and move your models. And now, admittedly, we haven't had a chance to do that. That's something we've been
tomorrow.
Well, yeah, you've got your laser cuts. But, we've been doing this primarily through Tabletop Simulator, but I still kind of understand what this feels like. Like, when I get to move models around, it's going to feel awesome how much I get to move around. Like they get to do so much. And you have so many choices you get to make kind of inside of how mobile you want to be. The positioning feels very relevant, which is something that, positioning is obviously important in its own right in things like 40K, but like really intense positioning stuff is stuff I miss. You only get it from certain games.
That the flip side of that is also true. You have a tremendous amount of ability to kind of control what your opponent can do if you understand what their abilities are.
Yeah,
and like where they can and cannot go with those abilities, because that, like, at the end of the day, this was my second favorite thing about it. So I'm going to sneak it in here. This is a scenario game from the word go. It's not a kill you game that has a scenario as an afterthought. It's a scenario game that has killing you as a means to an end. And so because they've designed the game like that, the amount of ways to control your opponent's stuff with placement and positioning is also just massive, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's another one of those things that's important in kind of the APM, alternating activation system. It is that where you are standing dictates a lot of where your opponent is allowed to go. So being able to be the first one to move, even stopping things like the Prism token factions have some version, but the like deployment token at end of turn that you can't do that within 10 inches of an opponent. It's a very, very powerful ability, but you can kind of push your stuff forward and be able to deny areas this way. And then this all kind of leads us down to Adept. Like, the Adept to me is like what is awesome about mini war.
Oh,
right? Yeah. It is so sublimely well put together to show off what is really awesome about tape measure based like mini war games on a tape. At any moment, the second you decide to activate Adept Shade, you have an infinite series of possibilities in front of you as to what you that ability, right? The choice range is enormous. You have things like the fact that the shade being near enemies gives your stuff a buff. Do you want to lean on that? One of my very, very first games, I did a thing where I sent a shade out to an objective and then actually walked directly away from the shade to go kill a unit, to score a point, and then teleport away back to an objective to score it like 18 inches. Like stuff like that, where like you just have all these like really interesting ways of like interacting, especially because you can place that shade kind of at any point in your activation, like as long as it's during while you're moving, before you move, after you move. You can use it to just go fast. You can do all, you're going around walls with it. You're juking with it. You go, I might go over here. You might need to react to that, but if you do, I just don't have to. It's a lot of stuff that, I mean, and it's true. And what it is that's also awesome about it is it's like a beautiful recreation of the unit from the actual PC game as well, because it does exactly what Adept Shades do. It's exactly the same, which is just really cool. Like, it's not only did they translate it perfectly, they made one of the most interesting units in like a mini war game to me, just because of the sheer amount of choices you have the second you decide to act.
For what it's worth, adepts are the thing that sold me on this game.
They're
100%.
Yeah, Jaden and I are both like absolute nerds for teleport. Adepts are just like they're such a cool way to be able. They give you so many interesting options. There's also being able to place yourself at the end of the round is such a like interest, just due to the way like scoring works and like where that's all
and
kind
actually,
of
so like going back to Ben's point about how they've managed to make the system fascinating. We found that passing in the fighting phase first has come up multiple times already because we've really desperately wanted
end of round placement stuff.
Yeah, because like we've had experiences where like he's got I don't remember what it's called, the Terran thing, where like at the end of the round I can put a thing down. Dropship. So I've been like, okay, so here's my entire turn's plan. I can't let that happen, so I'm gonna go put a shade on top of it, like right next to it, so that I can go first and teleport all my adepts right on top of it so that nothing can land there. And that's been really important, but I've given up stuff like I haven't charged with a unit or I haven't shot with the units so that I end up with less things in combat so that I don't have to fight as many times so that I can pass first. Like, it's a really fascinating thing that even that is important and cool, and you have to make decisions about it.
I genuinely, when they explained the system of passing originally, I thought it was almost never going to be a primary consideration when playing the game. And it has been like constantly on my mind every game that I've played. So well done, Archon.
Yeah,
seriously.
Well, they recreated perfectly kiting with Marines, so how can I not spend inordinate amounts of cash?
Hey man, you have to wiggle the models back and forth so that they shoot, and then
I do a pew pew.
Yeah, do a quick pew pew. Anyway, yeah. Well, that was kind of I think we genuinely have so many things that we would want to game really, really cool, but we kind of wanted to just kind of do a little bit of an overview of what we think is really, really interesting, and we'll probably get into some more kind of nitty gritty topics going. But that's kind of the main stuff we wanted to talk about today. You guys good? Everybody good? Any closing thoughts?
Models yet? Can we have our models yet, please? Come on, Archon, just ship them out. Go. I want them so bad.
Yeah.
For those of you listening and who have no idea who I am, I'm the painter idiot on the team. I want to paint these things so bad I can't barely stand it.
Yeah. Yeah, it genuinely feels like a war crime that these models aren't in my...
Yep.
Archon. Anyway, with that violation of the Geneva Conventions, we're going to close out for the week. Thank you so much for hanging out, everybody, and we'll see you guys next time.
Good night.
Bye.